All right, so I'm recording. So thank you very much. Chidozie said, please, can you allow us record this by granting us permission? I'm actually recording it, so I'll share with everyone after the class is over. Someone is annotating the screen. I need to get this off. Disable participant annotation. All right. Okay, moving on. All right, so I was making an analogy. So we get someone in IT sends us some data, or we download data from a database, and then we have to clean this data. We have to do transformation on this data. We have to maybe do chart on this data. Then next week, because we want to do week 1, then we are in week 2, we want to do the same report, and then we go through the same process again. We first go to extract that data or download that data from any source that the data is on. Then we change this data, and we figure that this is actually killing time. What if we can actually connect directly to that database, pull out that data in real time, perform your transformation, which is a one-off transformation actually, then load this data to an external tool or software for your visualization. That way, the next time you want to perform this operation or you want to do this again, you don't have to necessarily go and download that data set again, because you are connected live to either that database or the sources where those data is, or where those data are coming from. I don't know if this makes sense. So what Power Query allows us to do is to connect directly to our data sources. Then we are able to transform them and then load them to an external software or solution for our analysis. I hope this is very clear. If it's not clear, please try to drop questions on the chat, and then I'll make sure I attend to them. I'm trying to find a way to remove these marks on the screen. Someone actually put them there. Please give me a couple of seconds. Let me try and remove the annotation on the screen. All right, I've been able to do that. All right, the next question, after understanding what Power Query is, I hope we understand what Power Query is now, or what Power Query does. The next thing is, what exactly is powerful about this Power Query we are talking about? Because someone might ask that question. What exactly is powerful about Power Query? Now, so Power Query allows us, just as I mentioned, to what? To get data from hundreds of data sources. So data sources could mean Excel, could mean databases, could mean SAP, could mean web, Facebook, internet access database, could even mean CSV files, could mean PDF files. It could mean text files. There are times when someone sends us data, or we download data from the internet, or we copy data from the internet, and then we have a lot of columns and comma separators and all of that. So Power Query allows us to connect directly to all of these sources. So imagine we are able to get all of this data, then in Power Query is our engine. So Power Query, this data goes into our Power Query editor. Then we are able to refine it. We're able to transform all of this data to, because the way a raw data is coming might not necessarily be the way you want to use it. How you're now able to transform this data from the origin to what you want, and then you export this to either Excel or to Power BI. All right. Now, after Power Query has finished all of this, Power Query, don't forget, 3 things are very key. Power Query extracts data, transform this data, and load this data. That is just the 3 main functions or functionalities of Power Query. To collect the data or extract, to transform this data, and to load this data. So Power Query collects all of these data sets, refine them, transform them, and then send the finished product to either Excel or Power BI. Now, when this data leaves the Power Query, it goes into a data model. I'm going to explain what this does as we go through this class. So in a data model, you are now able to connect these files, maybe for these folders or whatever, to different things that will make you derive meaning from the data you want to transform. And after the data model, after you've done your data modeling, that is when you now move to visualization. That is when you are able to export your data to either Excel or Power BI and then make fantastic or interesting visualization that business owners or business leaders can now use to make decisions. I hope this is clear. Again, if it's not clear, if I've covered anything that is not clear, please drop this in the comment box and then I will react to them. Okay, the power relationship now. So I want to briefly talk about the relationship between Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power BI, so that it's not confusing and we are able to really understand this concept. So Power Query is just one of the piece of the suite of Power BI or business intelligence products from Microsoft. So before now, Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power View were three separate products that were built into Excel, maybe from Excel 2010, 13, and above. So Power Query refines that data just from the explanation I made above. Power Query collects and refines that data. Power Pivot models that data, and then Power View visualizes that data. So Microsoft thought about it that, oh, this makes sense. Why not, instead of making these three products or these three functions residual in Excel, why not make a standalone software that combines these three functionalities? And that is what bettered Power BI. So within Power BI, we have the query aspect, which is the Power Query. We have the data modeling or the Power Pivot as our data model, and then we now have the visualization. So next time, or when next you are asked that Power BI or Power Query, just understand that the combination of the Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power View came together to form what we have today as our Power BI. So still within Excel, we can actually still perform this operation, which is the query operation, the modeling operation, and the visualization operation. We can do these three within Excel. However, if you want a software or a solution that is made specifically for this, then we're talking about Power BI. I hope this makes sense. So like I said, features in Power Query are also available in Excel and in Power BI desktop. All right. So again, a quick explanation. Hold on, please. I need to react to a comment. All right, let's just move on. So now this is your data. So I brought this data in, or this diagram in, to further explain or illustrate what I'm talking about. So this is your data now. Like I said, we understand from what I've said so far that your data might be coming from the web, might be coming from spreadsheets, or might be coming from a database. So understand that this is your data. Now, this data goes into Power Query. What does Power Query do? Power Query allows you to connect to that data, to fetch that data. You can set up filters and conditions within that data, and then you can merge and combine different files, right? You can add, you can change this data, and you can shape this data. From there, you now publish this data, right? Or you export, if let me use that language, into your Power Pivot or your data model. Now, the language within Power Query is the M language. I'm going to explain this as we go on. Again, I want to reassure everybody there are some people when they hear about maybe a language or a coding language, they get scared. You might not necessarily learn or memorize how to code the M language for you to use Power Query effectively. But just for your knowledge, you should know that M language is actually the language of Power Query. Now, when this data leaves Power Query, it goes into our model, which is the Power Pivot. You know, I explained also that before now we had Power Query, Power Pivot, and what? And Power View. So I will still be using Power Pivot and data modeling interchangeably. So in Power Pivot, what do we get to do in Power Pivot? In Power Pivot, we're able to model our data. We're able to set up relationships. We're able to calculate extra columns. We're able to create measures, set KPIs, and make a cube. So within Power Pivot, the language in Power Pivot is the DAX language. Again, you really don't have to cram or learn the DAX language. It will be great. If you learn it, you'll be able to make powerful transformation. But if you've not done this, then however, if you are not very familiar with the DAX language, you can still use Power Pivot comfortably. So now, once this data leaves our Power Pivot, the next place is directly into our BI, which is for visualization basically. So we do all the hard work in Power Query and Power Pivot, then do it in our Power BI or the visualization part. All we just get to do is to visualize that data. We are able to make forecasts and analytics. We're able to have interactive experiences and what have you. We are also able to, after deploying our solution or our data set, we are also able to track this and make optimizations in our output by integrating our R and our Python. But all of this is high level. We really don't need this in this class. Again, if you don't have Power BI, like I said, all of these operations can still be performed within our native Excel. So with this diagram, I hope we understand now the relationship between Power Query, Power BI, and Power Pivot. All right, so let's move on. Now to the real business of this class. So from what we've learned so far, this is our business case. So Felsh Chemicals, a company that is based in the United States with offices in Denmark, Mexico, France, and Germany, just hired you as a consultant analyst. Currently, the business data are scattered across several Excel files in different branches, with only a fraction of the data residual in the company's Azure database. So for them to even try to understand or do their reporting, they require a 3-man team working for 5 days to even come up with their monthly report. And the manager is frustrated because he cannot at a go. He wants to have know at every present time that how much revenue the business is making across all its branches. He wants to know what chemicals are selling the most so as to make replacement decisions and then to avoid out of stock. The manager also wants to know which of his manufacturers' chemicals are they selling the more of, and the manager wants to know which chemicals are selling the least and needs to be discontinued. So your task is to harmonize all of these companies' data, answer the questions above, and set up an automated process such that when this business generates new data, the company's analysts only have to hit the refresh button to get the latest report. Does this sound challenging? So currently, we are going to be playing the role of a consultant analyst in this class. And the task we've been given is for a company called Felsh Chemicals. So Felsh Chemicals has been in operation for about 10 to 15 years. Now they have data that is scattered everywhere and they are not able to make real meaning of that data set. So what we are trying to do is to get them to harmonize or to help them harmonize all of these data sets from where these data are residual put all of this data together, answer the questions that the manager wants to be answered, and set up a process, because we won't be working with the company for long. We are going to set up a process such a way that when we leave, the company's analyst job is just to hit the refresh button to get. So anytime business new data comes in or new data gets generated, the company's analyst only has to hit the refresh button, and then it has the latest report. So that is what we have to do. So I'm done with the presentation part of this class. We are to dive straight into doing the hard work now. But let me entertain one or two questions based on what we've covered so far. So if you know you have a question or two, kindly drop them in the chat, and or you raise up your hand. I'll unmute your mic, and then you can ask your question. Okay, someone says, how do we automate? We are going to get into this. Just hold on. Once we start working with our files, we are going to get into this, and then we will understand this actually. So please, I sent out exercise files, and then I sent out the link to download Power Query for those of us that don't have. I'll walk through this very briefly for everybody, but if you've not done so, you can please try to download these files so that we can all maximize the benefits of the class. So if there is no more question, I would like to move on to our data set. Does anybody have a question of what we've covered so far? Francis Okoye asked the question, when we hear of ETL, they usually relate it with data warehouse. What is a data warehouse? Are data warehouse different from database? Is Power Query part of the tools like AWS Glue and other ETL softwares? To be sincere with you, I cannot answer these questions. I'm not very vast in database. I'm not a database administrator, and then so I might not be able to answer your question. Forgive me for that. And I'm very sure I actually know the question, and I know he has more knowledge of this than the person that is answering this question. Maybe he wants us to benefit, other participants of the class to benefit, but honestly, I do not have answer to that question. So someone asked a question that, what is the meaning of KPI and what's its function? KPI is key performance indicators. We are able to set this in Power BI, or yes, in Power BI basically. So what this does is to enable us set key performance indicator. That way, if our data set, or if we've reached a particular landmark, we'll be able to know that we have reached this landmark in our data set. So we're able to create this measure in such a way that we set just like setting metrics basically, that I want to know when my revenue hits XYZ, or when my product sold hits XYZ, and all of that. So basically, that is what I understand about that. Someone says, please, can you move back to the previous slide? This is it. I hope it's self-explanatory. So, okay, someone is asking us, what is the link to the exercise files? I sent this in the mail. Okay, someone has sent it again. So you can quickly download it, and then let's move on with the class. So for those of us that have downloaded, our Power Query, so I want to run through this. Please, if you cannot see my screen, if you are maybe on mobile and you cannot see my screen, at any point in time, you can zoom your screen to be able to see it very well. But I really hope you can see my screen. So for those of us that are using Excel 2016 and above, our Power Query can be found under the Data tab in the Get and Transform ribbon. If you are here, just click here, and then we can see our Data tab. So our Data tab is our Power Query rather is on the Data tab under the Get and Transform ribbon. However, if you are using Excel 2010 or 2013 and you've downloaded Power Query, I'm not going to go through that again. I believe that the link I sent self-explanatory. Someone says, should I open my own Excel files? Please don't open it yet. Just navigate to the folder where you've extracted your files. So for instance, these are my own files. So if you've downloaded the Power Query, what all you had to do is, or if you downloaded the exercise files, you have to extract, is a zipped file, so you have to extract it to a folder or to a location on your PC for you to be able to get all our files. So you really don't need to open them. In short, you don't even need to open any of these files to perform any analysis, all right? So back to my Excel. So under the Data tab, on the Get and Transform ribbon, that is where we get we get to see our Power Query. However, if you're using Excel 2010 and 2013, and then you've downloaded Power Query as an add-in, you are going to see it. If you close and open Excel again, you are going to see Power Query as a separate tab on its own, and it's going to pop up here. If you don't have that, you need to probably re-download it again, or you go to, I'll explain it now when I'm talking about Power Pivot. You just follow the same process, and then you'll be able to activate your Power Query. So for those of us that have gotten to see our Power Query already, there's another tool I want us to activate, or tab rather, which is the Power Pivot. So to do this, you have to come to the File tab. Under the File tab, we go to Options. I'm taking this as slow as possible, so let me do it again. So I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Options. I'm going to go to Add-ins. Under Add-ins, I'll come here, and under Manage, I'll click the drop down, and then I'll click Com Add-ins. On Com Add-ins, I'm going to hit Go. So I'll have this dialog box pop up. So all I need to do is to check my Power Query. Ensure that my Power Query is checked, my Power Pivot, I beg your pardon, is checked. So this is my Power Pivot here. I'll make sure it's checked. And then for if you're using 2013 also, and you've downloaded Power Query and you cannot see it, this is also the step for you to follow. If you're using 2010 or 2013, follow the same process. Go to File, go to Options, then click on Com Add-ins, and then check your Power Query. You have it checked here. However, I only need my Power Pivot. So for every other person, just check your Power Pivot in Excel and click OK. So you're going to have this tab, this Power Pivot tab. So please, does anybody, if you don't have this, if you are not here yet, or you've followed this process and you still don't have your Power Pivot, please can you let me know? Someone says, Fauzia says, I'm using Excel 2013. Do I still need to install Power Query? If you follow this process, like I mentioned, and you still don't have your Power Query either on the Get and Transform tab or as a pop-up tab, then you need to actually download it. So you need to go back to the link I shared, or someone shared it on the chat room earlier. So you need to go back there, click on, okay, those are the exercise files. Just download it. So someone says, I only have Power Map for Excel in com add-ins in my 2016. I'm using Excel 20, but Power Pivot doesn't show in the com add-ins. So again, let me go through this again. I'm on the file, options, add-ins, click on the drop down, and then I click on what? Com add-ins and hit go. So I should have it here. If you are using 2016, it really should be here. However, another way to access it under the data tab is actually present. The Power Pivot button is actually found on the data tools ribbon. So try and access it from here too. That is if you don't have it. All right, so enough about that. I'm using Excel 2007. I'm sorry if you're using 2007, you might not be able to really follow this class because the first version of Power Query, I think, is compatible from 2010 and above. All right, so let's just move on. For those that are not able to maybe follow this instruction to get their Power Pivot, just follow the class. The recorded session is going to be available. You can go through the process again of trying to, maybe while this class is going on, trying to download your Power Query add-in or your Power Pivot add-in, and then you're able to launch it. However, if you have this, as I've mentioned, can you please just drop a quick message for those of us that have it? Let's know if we are here already. You've activated your Power Pivot and your Power Query and you have it working. Just drop yes, 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 and if we are good, we'll just proceed. Yes, yes, all activated. Thank you. All activated. Yes, all activated. Okay, Fauzia, I see that you say yes, so which means you've been able to activate it. So beautiful. All right, yes. All right, so we have many people understanding or signifying that they've downloaded Power Query. Also, if you have Power BI on your system, you want to work on your Power BI desktop, you can also follow the steps we'll be going through in this video, and then so you don't really have to follow from Excel. You can also do all of this from Power BI. So I'm going to explain. Sometimes I might have to switch between Power Query and Power BI and Excel, but mostly I'll be working with Excel because I want to believe a lot of the these participants of this class will be working directly from Excel. So a recap, I want to do a recap of our business case. So in this class, what we want to do, we have some data sets. Someone says, I have both, on which should we practice? Really, if you have both Excel and Power BI and you're not very familiar with the Power BI, I would advise that you work with Power BI. If you work with Power BI, you might run into some errors or problems, but how you are able to navigate them would be great. So if you had both Excel and Power BI, I would advise you to work with Power BI. But however, for this training, I'll be working on Excel. However, most of all the functionalities, or a lot of the functionalities that are within Power Query, within Excel, are also present in Power BI. So you can work on Power BI, but I'll be working on Excel for this class. So these are my exercise file. If you've downloaded the zip file and you've extracted it, you are going to have exactly the files and one folder that I have here. Please don't try to move them around, just leave them as it is and don't even open them. So I want to open my own now just for understanding of the kind of data we have in that cell, or in that file rather. So our Felsh Chemicals, don't forget we have Okay, someone says Felsh Chemical is not in my exercise. Please disregard this. If you don't have, this is a Power BI file, Felsh Chemical. Please disregard. If you don't have this, it's fine. I just created this yesterday, so it's fine. So this is my data. For my US sales, I have my product ID, I have the date of each transaction, I have the zip file, the zip code rather, the zip code where the transaction took place, I have the units of items bought, and then I have the revenue for that particular item. So I'm going to close this. I don't want to save it. So, and then I have my sales in Mexico, in US, and then I have my international sales in Canada, Denmark, and France. Don't forget that the company is primarily in the United States. However, they have branches in other countries. So let me open, so let's start. Let's open a blank Excel file for those of us that will be working with Excel. So we are opening a blank Excel file. Don't open any of the files that that you have in your folder. So open a blank Excel file. Now on the data tab, under the get and transform ribbon, you are going to hit what? New query. For some people, you might actually see get data here instead of new query. So if you see get data, click on it. That is what you are working with. If you're working from Power BI, what you need to do is to click on get data. All right, get data is what you will see on Power BI. But if you're working from Excel, you're going to see new query. So if I click on the drop down new query, I'm going to say from file. So very briefly, like I said, Power Query allows you to connect to different data sources. So here I'm having Excel workbook, CSV, XML from text, from folder, from databases, Access database, SQL database. You can even connect to Azure and all of that. But for now, we want to first of all bring in our US sales, try and perform some operations on the US sale before we bring in other regions. So I'm going to say from file and then from workbook, which means from Excel. So I'll click on this. Please let's try and practice along as I'm doing this. So I'll click on from workbook and then I'll navigate to my folder where I have my US sales. So my US sales, I'm here now. I'm going to do this again for the benefits of those that are not here. New query or get data from file, from workbook. And then I'm bringing in my US sales first. So I'm importing, I'll click on import. And then this will now take us directly to our Power Query editor. So I'm going to have my Power Query editor, or rather, I'm going to have my navigator open, beg your pardon. So this is the file I want to work with. This is my US file on this sheet. If I click on sheet, I'll even see the preview of the content of that Excel file. So my product ID, just like it is in that file, the date of the transaction, the zip, the units, and then the revenue. All right, so what I want to do right now is to hit transform data. So we're going to see transform data under the navigator. So we're going to hit transform. If you don't have transform, I forgot the version. However, don't click on load. If you don't see transform data here, there has to be something that says maybe connect to query or something. But from here, I'm seeing transform data. So I'm going to click transform data. And then my Power Query editor is going to pop up. So right now, this is my Power Query. Michael Retoyo says, the transform data, is it transform data or edit? Okay, edit, exactly. Thank you very much, Michael. So edit, if you don't see transform data, what you're going to see is edit. All right, so if you click on edit, you are going to have your Power Query window is going to pop up, or your Power Query editor is going to pop up. So just a brief explanation on your Power Query editor. To your left, you have your queries. So if you have more than one queries, all of them will be listed here. Then this is the editor itself. You have your formula bar here. You have your tabs on top, and then you have your query settings on the right. Okay, you have your properties, and then you have your applied steps on the right. Now, this is very critical, and I would really love us to try to understand this very well. On this applied steps column, this is, the other time I was explaining that there are three process or functionalities you can perform or of the Power Query, which is the extraction, transformation, and then the loading. Now, while you are performing transformation or while you are doing a transformation within a Power Query editor, you are going to be seeing that these steps will be increasing. This is actually very important because what that is doing is that for each step you apply, you are going to have Power Query is going to write its M language in this formula bar. Like I said, you don't need to cram it. However, as you're performing your steps or as you're performing your transformation, try to read some of this code. You will get a sense or an understanding of how the M language is being structured. That way, as you work more with Power Query, you're going to understand more about the M language. But I just want us to understand that what we have here is actually the M language within Power Query. However, you don't need to learn it. What you need to focus on is the steps that are being applied. And what makes this very important is that if you've applied all of these steps to this data and you have your refined or your finished workbook or your finished files or finished data, the next time you want to perform this operation, all of these steps are going to be followed the same way in the sequence at which you have the applied steps here. So all of the steps are going to be followed and you really don't have to perform all of those operations again. So this is why this is very important. So when we brought in our data, I can see to my right here, Power Query is intuitive enough to quickly perform some steps for me. But for the benefits of this class, I'm going to delete this. I'm going to leave my source and I'm going to delete these three steps that Power Query has applied for me. I want to do them again so that everybody can learn as we go on. So if you want to also learn this and practice, just click on this delete button beside each of the steps that Power Query has applied. So I'm going to delete it and I'm going to delete my navigation. So I'm back to my source. So what I have here is my source. And then as you can see, this is the Excel itself. So from here, I can see the connection. So this data is being taken from excel.workbook, file content, users, control room. So this is just my directory to the file on my system. It will be different on your system. So what I have here, I have the name, I have just the properties of that data or that Excel sheet, basically. However, what I only need is this data column. Every other thing should go. So what I want to do is to click on all the columns. So I'm going to click on item and then I'll hold shift and I'm click on the last column, which is hidden. So I've selected 1, 2, 3 columns. I also hold control and select name. That way I've highlighted these 4 columns. I only have data left. So what I want to do is to right click on my selection and say what? Remove columns. So I'm going to click on remove columns, and then once I've done this, all of my columns will go and I'll be left with my data column alone. Are we here? Please, if you are not here, just quickly drop a message on the chat, and then will look at your error together and quickly try to fix it. So someone is raising their hand. Elisha, I'm going to unmute your mic right now. Then you can ask your question. So Elisha, you can unmute your mic and then ask your question. So someone says, I'm not there. How do I go back? I'm not there. How do I
No,
go
I'm
back?
actually good. I'm actually good. I just I didn't see the comment section. That's why I raised my hand.
Okay. Beautiful, beautiful. All right. Thank you very much. All right. So someone says, I just opened my Excel 2013. I want to add the data, screens of, how do I go back? All right, some people are saying they are not here yet. I might not be able to go over it again. Okay, let me just quickly go through it from the Power BI tab. So on your Excel, you are going to see, okay, I'm there now. On your Excel, you are going to see get data or new query. You are going to click on Excel. You are going to navigate to your exercise file, you select US sales, you click on open or import, and then your Power Query editor will pop up. This is taking a bit of time. Okay, so this is the Power Query. I'll click on this. I'll check this box and then click on transform data or edit data. And then I'm going to have my Power Query editor open. So on my Power Query editor, I'll perform the first transformation we did. Please forgive me for having all these many. Okay, so this is a sheet. All right, so these are my steps. My source. Okay, so I hope the person that asked that question is here now. So let me just proceed. So we've deleted our 3 columns. So we are left with our data tab. So what we just need to do is to come to this very tiny button beside the data, beside the header of the table, which is data. We want to click to expand that data. So I'm going to be clicking on this tiny button here. Please let's follow along. So after you click that, you're going to have this pop-up window, and then you're going to get all the columns in the file. What you want to do is uncheck this box that says use original column name as prefix. You want to uncheck that and then hit OK. Can we see that our steps are increasing as we are going on? So we've moved from our source now to removed columns, which was the operation we performed here. I hope you can see. So this is the M language I was written for that table. The remove columns, the source. So we removed the name, item, the kind, and the hidden columns. And then what we did next is to expand that data. So those are the steps that our Power Query is following. So when next we are bringing in new data, we don't need to do all of this again. Power Query remembers the steps we followed and then it follows that. So the next thing we need to do, we can observe that we have columns as our headers. This is not what we want. Okay, someone is asking, how do I remove column? Just right click on all the columns you want to remove and click remove columns. Let me just quickly do this again. I've got 2 people asking that question. So from your source, you click on, this is the first column, or you can do it one by one actually. If you are not, if you can't do everything at once, just click on item, right click, and you will see remove. All right. Once you are done, you go to kind, right click and say remove. You go to hidden and say remove. But to be smart, I just clicked on my item, I hold my shift, select my hidden, I hold control and select my name. So I'm able to remove all the columns. So the next question says, so this is my remove column. So how do I expand? This, you expand by this tiny button beside your data header or your table header. So this tiny button, that looks like two arrows on in opposite directions. If you click on that, you are going to have this pop-up. You are going to uncheck the box that says use original column name as prefix, and you hit OK. So you are going to have your expanded columns. So the next thing we want to do, let's move on very quickly, is to promote our headers. You can see that we have column as our headers, and that is not what we want. We actually want product ID, name, zip, unit, and revenue to be our headers. So what we need to do, there are two ways to do this. You either come under the Home tab in the Transform ribbon. You are going to see what we call use first rows as headers. Can we all see this? If we can see this, just hit it, and then your first row will be promoted to your header. However, if a very fast way I do this is to click on this tiny button that is joining the rows and the columns together. I can click on the drop down and say use first rows as headers. So however you want to do it, just do it, and then once you click on this, you will see that your product, your titles have been promoted, or your headers have been promoted, and you've done away with the columns, the column numbers. Are we good? So the next thing we want to perform. Okay, right now, so look, everybody, look at my right-hand side on my applied steps. What I did was to promote headers, right? But Power Query has added another step for me, which is change type. I didn't do this, but it was smart enough to do that. But I want to uncheck this and really go through and go over it again. So you don't really have to uncheck yours, just leave it or delete that step. But what I want to do is to now change the type of my data. This is very, very important if you are working on Power Query. You need to define or tell Power Query what file type you are working with. So my first column is my product ID, and it's saying ABC or 1, 2, 3. That is not what I want. I actually want to change this to, so on here you can either decide if this is a decimal, is this a whole number, is this a text, and what have you. What I want to select is text. Why do I say it's text? Even though my product ID is showing as numbers, one pro tip while working with this is any number that you cannot perform an arithmetic function on. So you cannot multiply it, you cannot add it, you cannot subtract, you cannot, what's it called, divide. You should actually count it as text. So you're talking about product ID, order number, zip code, those kind of things. Can you add, or phone numbers? Can you add one phone number to another phone number? Can you add one zip code to another zip code? Can you add one product ID or order ID to another? So typically, what you should do is to format those kind of data as what? As text. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to format that as text. I'm going to go over to my date column. Please ensure you do this. If you don't do this, you might be having errors when you want to start doing your analysis. So on the date tab, I'm going to click on this again, and then I'm going to say, of course, this is a date, so I'll click on date. On my zip column, again, I'll tell my zip is actually text. So I'll click on text. My units are whole numbers. I'll click on whole numbers. Then my revenue is decimal because it has decimals. So I'll click on this and say my revenue decimal is a decimal number. So someone is asking a question. Let me quickly interact with this. So someone says, a quick question. How do you remove funny characters from text themselves, like clean the data? We have various transformations that we can do within Power Query. I really don't want to dive into all of that, but first of all, we need to first understand if you have some funny characters and you want to remove them, you can use the Power Query find and replace, or the replace values, if you know that that will solve it. So you can use the replace values and you can replace it with blank. So if for instance, let's say all my product ID has a semicolon affixed to them, and I want to remove it, I can go here and say replace values. I can, so on my replace value, I can put my semicolon here, for instance, and replace it with nothing. And I click OK. So it's going to replace all my semicolon with nothing. Also, if you know that maybe the characters are consistent, you might want to do maybe like a conditional column to extract your file. So it depends on the type of funny characters you're talking about and how consistent they are throughout your data. So someone says, it seems you changed zip to text. Yes, I did. I explained that on zip, if I change my zip to numbers, it really doesn't do anything for me because I cannot add two zip codes together. I cannot subtract one zip code from the other, nor can I multiply or divide. So it really is not a number or a whole number as far as our data analysis is concerned. So we don't want it to disturb us. That's why I just formatted it as text. So basically, if you see phone numbers, if you see product codes or product IDs, usually as a principle, I format everything as text. All right, so moving on. So I hope we are all here. Who is not here, please? If you're not here, quickly signify before we move on. Okay, so we've been able to, if we've performed this transformation, we've changed all our file types, and we've been able to assign the appropriate type to them. The next thing we need to do is to now load this data back into Excel. All right, so what we need to do under the Home tab, I'm going to click on this drop down that says close and load. Please don't click close and load itself. Click on the drop down that says close and load. If you close and load, you are going to see close and load to. I'm going to click close and load to, and then it's going to bring this dialog box. All right. What I want to do, please, again, what we are clicking is close and load to. Then once you have this dialog box, please don't select table. It says select how you want to view this data in your workbook. If you select table, Power Query is going to bring in all the columns and the rows, or all the data we just transformed in Power Query. Is going to bring it into your Excel workbook. Now, this might not be dangerous in itself, but however, if you're working with large data sets, that is running into thousands or millions of rows, if you're bringing all of this into your Excel workbook, you might have a lot of challenges because the file might drag, and because Excel has limitation of about a million and a few hundred rows, a million rows basically. So you don't want to bring all of that data into your Excel. What you want to do is to only create connection. So if you create connection, you'll be working with the data that is housed within Power Query, but you'll be doing what? Visualization or analysis in Excel or Power BI. So I'm only creating connection. And then the next thing I want us to click, please, this is very important, is to click add this to data model. So I'm going to click add to data model. Once I click add to data model, I'm now going to hit load. So this is going to take a couple of seconds. You can see on my right hand side, you're already seeing the query being loaded. So you can already see, so 285,000 rows loaded, 325, 872, 327,000 rows loaded. Can we see now? So we finished loading our data into what? Into Power Query. I have a couple of questions here. Let me quickly, please, if you are here, just give a yes. Let's know that you are here. Someone says, I clicked on load instead of load to. What do I do to reverse it? If you clicked on load, you will probably see all your data is populating in your Excel. This will take longer than what we have. So you are still going to see all your data coming into Excel. What you have to do is to go back to your Power Query. And so if you want to go back to your Power Query, you can either right click, okay, because you have loaded your data to Excel, you want to say show queries. You want to go under your data tab, you want to say show queries, you want to now double click and go back into your Power Query. Then you click on the drop down and say click and load to. Okay, so you say click and load to. So it's going to bring in your data back into, so it's going to bring it. So once you say click and load to, you can now work with it or within the within Excel. Or alternatively, if you go to data and you click on show queries, once you see your query, you are going to see a button that says create connection or add to data model. Just click on that. If you've clicked on that, you will be fine. So you can just leave the table that has been loaded into Excel. You can leave it the way it is, or you can delete it if you want. So the basic thing is for us to have this. So very quickly, so for those of us that are here, so we already have our query has been loaded. So the next thing we want to do, let's just quickly answer a couple of questions from for our manager. So we want to go to our insert tab. Please, let's follow along if you are here already. Under the insert tab, I want to click on pivot table. Someone says we should untick. He said we should untick data able. I don't understand this question. He said we should untick data. I don't understand. But if what you are saying is, I'm saying that you should click on the box that says load to data model. That's the box I'm asking you to click on. You have to check that box that says add data to data model, then click on OK. For Ellie says close and load not appearing is grayed out. Okay, please try to close your Power Query editor and come back to Excel. If you are back in Excel, I want you to go to data and then you click on show queries. If you click on show queries, you're going to have this query here. So on this query, I want if you right click, you are going to see something that says, if you right click or you over it, you're going to see something that says create connection to query or something like that. I've forgotten this thing. But if you create a connection, you are going to have what we have. All right. So someone says mine is showing error after changing the revenue to decimal. Is this right? No, that is not right. Please try to undo that step and do it again. It shouldn't show error because the file I shared with you is the same one I'm working with. So really, it shouldn't show an error, and I'm sure that's the same thing everybody is working with. So it shouldn't show you an error. However, if you are still selecting it and it's giving you an error, maybe you want to change it to an old number, you won't get the same result we are getting, but at least you can work with it for the time being. So if it's showing you error, you want to delete that step, then try to change the file type again to maybe old number, and then you'll be good. All right, so very quickly, for those of us that are here, the next thing I want us to do is to go to insert. On the insert tab, we are going to go to pivot table. It's on the top left-hand corner of the ribbon. So you're going to click on pivot table. If you click on pivot table, you are going to have the pivot table dialog box open. So what you have to do is, of course, if you've done this very well, this box should be checked already. Use this workbooks data model. So the data you've added to the data model, you can select this. Don't select table or range or this. Just select, use this workbooks data model, and then choose where you want the pivot table report to be placed. So I want to choose an existing sheet. So I'm going to delete what I have here, and I want my location to be here. So I want my data to be here. And then I'm going to click OK. So I'm using this workbooks data model. So I'm going to click OK. I want to believe we are here. If we are here, the next thing we want to do is to now do some transformation or do some quick analysis on our data. So if you go to your pivot table fields, if you click, anytime you click on this pivot table, you are going to get on your right hand side of the screen, you're going to have a pivot table field open, and then you have your sheet. So you want to click on this drop down, and then you are going to have all the columns that are within your data. So my product ID is here, my date, my zip, my units, and then my revenue. So quickly, I can just drag my revenue to values. I can drag my revenue to values to get my total revenue, which is this. My total revenue is, let me just, in dollars, let me put dollars and remove the decimals, 137 million. I'm going to add another pivot table now. Go to insert, pivot table, use this workbook data model, existing worksheet. I've selected my location, and then I'm going to click OK. I want to know the quantity of items that have been sold. So I want to go to units. I'm going to drag my units field into values. If I do that, I'm going to have my sum of units. So I'm going to, let me format this with comma separators. Let me reduce the decimal places. So I have my total revenue, and then I have my units. Are we following? Please, if you are here, just quickly drop messages. Let me know that you are here. If you have any challenges, quickly drop them. Let's look at it together. Please, if you are here, just drop. I want to be sure that more people are following. So someone says, I'm asking, mine is showing error after changing the revenue to decimal. I think I've treated this. Please, Chidozie, if you are still experiencing this, let me know. If you are still experiencing error after changing to decimal, I've said that what you should do, maybe try to change to whole numbers, or delete that step and do it again. So if you delete the step in Power Query and repeat it, you are going to have your real figures. Or if you know that after changing to decimal, you're still getting that, just change it to whole numbers. You'll be able to work with it. Promise says, I'm asking because mine actually has your sheet that way, but created a table on my Excel sheet. Promise, that is because you clicked load to and not, you clicked load and not load to. If you have selected load to, you would have created a connection. So load to connection. However, even if you have load to, I explained earlier, just go to your data tab, click on show queries. You're going to have this query pop up on the right hand side of your screen. Try to right click it or over it, and you're going to see something that says add to data model or create connection, something like that. So if you create that, if you click on add to data model, then you now go to insert, and then you go to pivot table. You go to insert, you go to pivot table, then you are going to use the data model that, or the connection or the data model that you've created. So you click on use this workbook data model, you click on existing worksheet, and then you click on OK. So you'll be able to create a pivot table. So we've been able to figure out what our total revenue is and what our total units is. The next thing I want to do is to probably find what else can I analyze. Okay, let's do dates. So we want to know what is our month-on-month revenue. So I can drag my date field into rows. Sorry, excuse me. Let me undo my step. This is not what I want to do. I want to work on this pivot table. So to click on this, to work on a pivot table, you have to click on it. Note that if you click anywhere else aside your pivot table, maybe on a blank sheet, the pivot table field is going to disappear. But if you want to work on a pivot table, you need to click on a pivot table, then your pivot table field will appear on your right. So what I want to do next is to do a month-on-month revenue. So to do that, I'm going to drag my date field. I'm going to drag my date field into rows. So Monsurat is asking a question. Monsurat is asking a question. Can you please explain the basic concept of pivot table generally for better understanding? All right, a pivot table is just like an aggregate table that enables you to aggregate a larger data set into smaller not into secondary data. So take for instance, in this group, for instance, each of us have our own maybe unique data. So take for instance, each of us have our own unique names, we have our own unique phone numbers, addresses, email address, we have our own gender and all of that. So if I'm going to take the data of everybody in this class, for instance, I'm going to have maybe probably like 100 or 200 records. Now, if I want to summarize that data by, okay, let's say I want to know how many males and females are in this class, that is called an aggregate. So a pivot table allows me to do what? To make this aggregate. So that is what we're doing. So we're going to aggregate that data either by our fields, either by our gender, or we want to aggregate it by our age, or we want to aggregate it by our anything, any metric we want to. So that is the basic concept of the pivot table. So someone says, please, how did you change the revenue to dollar and then remove decimal? Okay, if you click on it, if you've clicked on your result, under the Home tab, under the number ribbon, you are going to see $sign. So once you click on the $sign, you are going to have your dollar in front of your figure. Then to remove your decimal, you only need to come here. Still on the number on the number ribbon, you see increase decimal and decrease decimal. So you just click on the decrease decimal 2 times to remove the 2 decimal places. Then for units, all I need to do, because I don't want units cannot be in dollars, so I only came here under the number and I click on comma. So once I click on that, it's going to use comma separators on my figures. Then I'll click on my decrease decimal 2 times. So someone is asking, the pivot table is not showing on my workbook to access the pivot table fields. Okay, you need to click, so for you to work on the pivot table, like I said, you need to click on the pivot table pop-up you have. So it is on, if I click here, everybody look at my screen now. If I click on a random cell, my pivot table field will disappear. But if I click on a pivot table field or a pivot table, then my pivot table field will appear. That's just the basics of how it works. But if you've not added any pivot table to your Excel sheet, you need to go to data, you need to go to insert, I beg your pardon, and then you need to click on pivot table. So if you click on pivot table, you are going to be you're going to have a dialog box that says create pivot table, choose where the data you want to analyze. My data is in my data model. This is why I'm selecting data model, and it says choose where you want the pivot table report to be placed. So I'm choosing, do you want it on a new sheet or you want it on your existing worksheet? I want it on my existing worksheet, and then I can click OK. I hope this makes sense. For those of us that says, for those of us that clicked on load, if you followed my and you have all your data in your Excel worksheet, if you follow the steps I mentioned, you'll be able to bring back the connection. But if you are not able to do so, just follow this step for pivot table. So select all your data. So maybe let's say my data is in let's say my data is here. For instance, let's say from your query, your data uploaded into Excel, and this is your data. So you are going to select the whole column or the whole data. So you can start from A and highlight it to maybe H, if that is where your data is. Then go to pivot table. Then you click on select table or range. So okay, select table or range, you click here and then you select your data. So this is the column I want to work with. Then you can now click on add this data to the model here. So that way you are able to work and do what exactly we are doing right now. So moving on. I don't know if there's any question. I didn't get how you sum or unit showed in same row with revenue. Mine showed as column just beside sum or revenue. Okay, I got it. Format to currency and dollar. Thanks. Someone said my pivot table page didn't show this. Use this workbook data model, but it's working. I don't understand that, Fauzia. Please, if you can pose that question again. So quick one. Someone says that he didn't get how I was able to get my revenue to show like this, and how I was able to get my unit to show like this. So I'll be doing that on this table again. So after you've clicked on the drop down on your sheet, and then you click on revenue. Now, don't just click on it. I want you to, so there are 4 boxes here. One box says filter, the second one says columns, the third one says rows, and the last one is fields. What you are supposed to do is to drag your revenue into the one that says values. So if you drag it into the one that says value, you're going to have your sum of revenue. The same way, if it's units you are working with, if you drag your units into values, you are going to have your units. However, this is saying sum of unit. For some, maybe by default, your aggregation is showing count. If you want to change from count to sum to average, just click on the drop down on the values. So this drop down, you click on the drop down and then you go to value field settings. If you click that, you'll be able to change from sum to count to average. So you can select sum and then you can say okay. So I hope that answers your question. So let's go back to what we're working with. So I wanted to create a date, a month-on-month sales. So what I want to do, note that I'm going to drag my dates now. I'm going to be dragging my dates into rows. Please remember, don't forget, you're dragging my dates into rows. So it's going to bring all the dates into my pivot table, but that is not what I want. I actually want to perform a what? A month aggregate. I want my data to be showing by month and not by date. So what you're going to do is to right click on that table. You're going to right click and you're going to say group. If you click on group, you're going to have this pop-up that says, how do you want to group? Is it in seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, quarters, or year? I want to select months. So if I select month and I click OK, watch what happens. My data will be grouped into months. I want to believe we are all here. So after that, when this is done, I can then drag my revenue into what? Into values, because I want to know my revenue on a monthly basis. I want to believe we are here. I've dragged, so I have my date, my month aggregate, and then I have my what? I have my my revenue. If you are working on Power BI, let me just quickly do this. If you are working on Power BI and you've brought in your if you brought in your data, what you need to do, please hold on while my pivot table fixes itself. So if you are working on Power BI, what we are supposed to click on is close and apply. I'm getting a error. I'm getting an error. Okay, I'm applying the query changes. Once you've brought in your data, you have to come to under your visuals. You can then drag and follow this process just as we've done. Let me close this. Do I want my Power Query Editor? Do I want to apply? Not now. Okay, let me say yes. I want to apply the changes. So for those of us working with within Power BI, once you've brought in your data, all you need to do is to go to the data that you've brought in, and then you can drag your revenue to your canvas, and you can select card visual. Once you select card visual, you are going to have your revenue. Again, if you select card visual again, you can add in your units. So this is my units. I can add my units here, and then I'm going to have my total unit. This data is somewhat different from the one I shared. So if you are getting a different figure, don't panic. So this is it. This is your total revenue, and this is your total unit. For the date, there is a date hierarchy that has been created by default. If you click on the drop down, you can select your month. Once you click on months, and then you can bring in what? You can bring in your revenue. But this is for people working on Power BI. If you're not working on Power BI, you really don't need this. So let me go back to my Excel. So someone asked me, how did I group? So let me just do this again. So I'm going to let me remove my dates now. Let me remove all my dates. Let me just quickly go over it. What I did was to drag my dates into rows, and then I did a right click on my date, and then I said group. So you are going to see the option to group. So if I click on group, I can group by months. Then you click OK. I hope the person that answers the question has gotten it now. So group, and that is that. If you are here, can you quickly drop messages in the chat room? Let me know that you are here. So that is my aggregate. If you even want to make this cleaner, you can leave the months on your pivot table field. You can remove the date itself and leave the date by month. So let me remove my date and I leave my month. So I only have my months here. I can quickly format this by putting the $sign and removing the decimals. And I can also say, let me sort. Okay, I don't need to sort because this is already a month aggregate. So I'm pasting my data here. Okay, we have people that are here already. Now, what we've done is to analyze our data for the US sales or for the US office, all right? But don't forget that there are also sales that are recorded in other regions. And now what we want to do is to bring in all those sales into, or to combine all those sales with our US sales so that we can have a more comprehensive data set that we can work with. So what we need to do right now is to head back into our query. All right. So we're going to, if you want to go back into your query, if you don't have your query window open, what you need to do is to go to data, show queries. If you click on show queries, your query is going to pop up, and you only need to what? Right click and edit to go back into your Power Query editor. So if you're in your Power Query editor, so we are now back into our Power Query editor. The next operation we want to perform now is to bring in our international sales. All right. So to do that, we need, don't forget that if our sales, our international sales are in a folder called international. All right. So what we need to do is to say new source. So new source is if under your on your home tab and under the Power Query new query ribbon, you are going to click on new source, and then you are going to go to file, folder. I will select my folder now. So my folder path, what you just need to do, navigate to the folder on your system, the folder called international, where you've extracted your data to. So I'm going to go to mine is in documents, Power Query, exercise files, international. So this is it. This is what I want to click, international. I want to believe we are here. So if you click on international and you say, okay, and you're going to hit okay. Are we here? Can we proceed? I want to make sure I'm carrying everybody along. So if you are here, just quickly let's punch in our yeses, and so we can move on. Okay, someone says, can you come again as regards the international file? Okay, let me quickly do that again. So let me close this now. If you are here, I'm sorry. Let me just take it again. So I'm in my Power Query editor. You are going to go to new source. Please, if you are here, just keep putting in the yeses. If you've not put it already. So I'm going to say new source. All right, new source. I'm going to go to under file, and I'm going to select folder. Okay, I'm going to select folder, and then you are going to navigate to your folder, your international folder. So mine is in libraries, documents, and then Power Query, exercise files, international. And I'm going to hit what? Okay. Then I'll hit okay again. So I hope it's clear now. Kola Wale read one. I hope it's clear now. So if you are here already, so the next thing you want to do is to say what? Transform data, or edit, as for some people. So you say transform data. So you're going to have this new query pop up. Don't forget, this is our first query that we created. This is our new query now, international. And we can see the contents of the query in our Power Query editor. So we have So what we need to do, all this, so again, these are the properties of that folder. So this is telling you that there are three files in this folder, which is the Canada sales, the Denmark sales, and then the France sales. Someone Promise is asking a question again. Sorry, I'm taking you back, but that's above in the image is a problem. I don't understand this question. I'm sorry, Promise. Please type it again. So this is saying I have three files in that folder. I have Canada, Denmark, and France. These are the extension of the file. They are CSV, the date they are accessed, the date modified. All of these are just gibberish to me. I really don't need them, or we don't need them in this class. What we really need is the record in this attribute folder. So what I want to do is to click on the attribute folder, the attribute column, I beg your pardon. The attribute column, are we here now? Apologies, I don't I don't want the attribute column. What I want is the content, the column that says content. So I'm going to click on my column that says content, which is the first column. So after clicking on my first column, I want to right click and say what? Remove other columns. So I'm going to do this, remove other columns. Again, let me do this again. So we are all on the same page. Let me remove this. After our source, after we've loaded our, okay, someone says my screen is frozen. Please hold on. Let me try to fix this. Please hold on. Let me just try to fix this. I want to right click and say remove other columns. Okay, my screen is still hanging. All right, I guess I might have to stop sharing and start sharing again so that I can make this work. So let me see, let me stop sharing and then let me try to share again. Please let me know once you can see my screen. It's still trying to come up. I'm having a little bit of difficulty trying to make it come up. So let me stop it again. And then let me share the screen. still not coming up. Please give me a couple of seconds. Let me try to fix this. All right. So okay, where did we stop? After our source. So I said that I want us to remove all other columns aside our first column, which is the content column. So what do we have to do? We have to click on the first column, which is the content. We right click it and say what? Remove other columns. So what I want to say is to say remove other columns. So all the other columns are going to go and I'll be left with my first column only. All right. So the next thing I want to do is to now what? Merge all of this content together. So we're going to combine. So if you click on these two arrows facing downwards beside content, you are going to see something that says combine files. And that is what I'm going to click. So it says evaluating query. And then we are going to see this pop up. So it's asking us that you want to combine files. So it picks a sample file, which sample file you want to use, the first file, and then just leave everything here. You really don't need to worry much about it and just hit OK. So what that is going to do is going to bring, remember that our three columns, remember that our Canada sales, our France sales, and our Germany sales are in three different Excel sheets, but they are within the same workbook. So what this is doing, what we are doing right now, what Power Query is doing, is to bring those three files together. Don't forget, we didn't open any of these files. We didn't copy any of the files and maybe paste it anywhere. All we are doing is we are using Power Query to connect and extract the content of those files, all right, because they are within a folder. So we just connected to the folder and then we are performing our transformation. I hope this makes sense. So right now, if you see, if I click on this drop down that says country and I click on load more, we are going to see the three states that are there, which is Canada, France, and Germany. Those are our three countries, or the three branches, or the three files that are within the folder. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that the next time we are getting any other data from any other location or brand, once we drop that folder, once we drop that file in this folder, automatically we have what? We have transformed, automatically we have a report already. We just need to hit refresh for us to have our updated data set. I hope we are understanding, or we are getting to understand the beauty about using Power Query now. So we really don't have to be opening the files one by one or trying to copy them and paste them together before we can do any analysis. All we just did was to use Power Query to connect directly to the folder that is housing them, and then we are performing our transformation. So right here, we've already gotten our Canada, France, and Germany sales. We've combined them together. All right. So now we have a new query called international. Don't forget, this is our US query. This is our international query. Everything we have here are helper queries. So I can come here and minimize this. So we know we are only working with our international query and our US international sales and our US sales. Now we need to do one more thing. Don't forget that all we've done here is put together our, what's it called, our sales in other countries, but we want to also merge this with our sales in US. I hope this makes sense. Now, the function within Power Query that allows us to do this is what they call the append query function. All right. So what we are going to do, the append query is going to combine our US sales with all the other sales from what? From all other regions. I hope this makes sense. So I'm going to click on, so let's click on our US, on our sheet 1, which is housing our US or United States sales. So I'm going to click on that. All right. And then I'm going to say what? I'm going to say, go to append queries. I'm going to click the drop down beside append queries. Append query can be found on the home tab under the combine ribbon. If you can see my mouse, under the combined ribbon, we can see append query. So I'm going to click on the drop down beside it and click on what? Append queries as new. So if I click on append queries as new, so it's asking me that what queries do I want to combine? I want to combine my United States, which is my first query here, and I want to combine what? My international, which is this. So all my international sales. So I'm combining, I should have renamed this US sales, but let's leave it as sheet 1. And then I'm combining it to international. If we are here, let's click OK. So we're going to have a new query that says append 1. So let me rename this, my append 1, to what? All sales. All sales. So rename, you can either right click your append 1 and say rename, or you go to your properties and say rename. Or you can go to, so I'm also going to rename my sheet 1. I'm going to rename it US sales. So I have my all sales now. So I have 3 queries. I have US, I have international, and I have all sales. Now you will notice something. Someone asked the question that how can I append queries in Power BI? You can do this straight from, so if you go back to, once you have this under your home tab and you want to go, this is Power BI. If you want to go back to your Power Query editor, you need to come to, on the home tab, you need to come here under the, and click on transform data. It's either say transform data or edit queries, depend on the version of Power BI you have. So I'm going to click on transform data. So it's going to open my, Power Query editor, and then I'm going to go to under my home tab, I'm going to see append queries. Do you see that for the person that asked how do you append queries in Power BI? So you're going to see append queries here. So you click on that, and then you say append as new queries. So let me close this for now and go back to my Excel. So someone says, how did I arrive at all sales? I only renamed my appended query. So if you rename If you append the query as new, I have what says, I have a new query called append 1. So I just right click on my append 1 and renamed it to what? All sales. If you forgot to click on append as new, imagine you just say append queries while on your US sales. So it's going to append all of those queries into your US, which means that you have to be working with this. So you only have to rename your US as what? As all sales. But appended as new, that is why I have my what? All sales. Now, let's look at something together. When I was on my international, I can see that we have 5 columns. I have my product ID, my date, my zip. I have the units, the revenue, and a 5th column that says country. But while I was in US, I didn't have what? I don't have a 5th column. All right. Now, when we appended those queries, we are getting null values for what? For all sales in the US, because we didn't have any country. So if I click on this drop down, for instance, and I say load more, I'm going to see all my columns, all the sheets I appended, or the countries. So I'll see France, I'll see Germany, I'll see so France, Canada, and Germany. And I'm seeing a 4th what? A 4th country that says null. That null is actually our what? Our US sales. So what we need to do is to go and replace our null values with what? With United States. So what do I have to do? On your home tab, you are going to see replace values. Replace values. So if I click on replace values, you have to be clicking on country before you can do that. You have to click on your country column, then you go to replace values. Now, what I want to replace is my what? Is my null. Please, this is case sensitive. Just type it as small letters. So I want to replace null. And what do I want to replace it with? I want to replace it with United States. Okay? I want to replace it with United States. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to say, okay. Can we all see this now? So I've been able to replace my null values as what? As United States. The next thing I need to do is to what? Is to change my file type. So very quickly, I'll just change my product ID to text. I'll change my date. Okay, my date is already as date. You can change it also. I'll change my zip to text, my units to whole numbers, my revenue to decimals, and then my country is text. All right. If I've done this, the next thing I need to do is to what? Is to load this back into my Excel, and let's quickly do some transformation. So I'm going to click on the drop down. Please, for the people that made the mistake the first time, please don't do that again. Don't click on close and load. What you need to click on is close and load to. So you need to click on the drop down under close and load and say close and load to. So when you see close and load to, you are going to have this pop-up window within Excel, and you have to come to what? Only create connection. Please don't bring in the table. If you bring in the table, you're going to slow down your workbook, and it might take forever before it responds. But what you want to do is to only create connection and then click add to data model. These are very important. So you're going to click only create connections and then add this to data model. Once we've done that, I can click on what? Load. So on my right hand side, you're going to be seeing my query as they come into my international, my all sales parameter, and all that. Let me reduce this to make this smaller. So you can see my data is coming into Excel, and they are being loaded into the data model also. So my sales are coming in. This is just going to take a couple of seconds, and then I'm going to have my new data in Excel. Finally, it's here. So this is my all sales. So very quickly, I'm going to open on Excel. I'm going to open a new sheet. I'm just going to click on this plus sign that's under new sheet. So I'm going to have a new sheet. So what I want to do is to what? Is go to data, is to go to insert, go to pivot table. I'm going to say use this workbooks data model existing worksheet. I'll say okay. Now I'm going to have a pivot table field. Let me close this workbook query for now so we can all see this. Let me make this bigger. Now on pivot table field, we are going to see two columns. We are going to see active and we are going to see all. We want to come to all. So what we want to do is to click on the drop down on the all sales, and what? We want to drag our country to rows. We drag our country to rows, and then we're going to drag our revenue to values. Can we all see this now? So I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to use my dollar sign. I'm going to minimize the decimal. I can also sort. Let me right click and sort largest to smallest. So we have our biggest revenue on top. So I hope we can all see this now. I've been able to put in all of that data, and then we are able to summarize by our country sales. If we are here, let's put in our yes. Let me know that we are on the same page. Beautiful. I can already see the comments. Fauzia is saying, please, can you take this new sheet discussion again? You say almost, my Excel is still loading the queries. Okay, beautiful. So Fauzia, all what I did was you can still do that in the sheet you are on. I just don't want to confuse it with the, my sheet one is my US sales. I just opened a new sheet, and let me call this my all sales. I just opened a new sheet. Opening a new sheet is not really a big deal. Just come down on your Excel on the sheet name, click on the plus sign to open a new sheet. Then you go to insert, and then you click on pivot table. So on your pivot table, once that comes up, you are then going to what? Going to bring in the data. You are going to go to all. You are going to drag your country to rows, and then you're going to drag values to revenue. If this is done, now let's go to the beautiful stuff. Now, you remember that our Felsh Chemicals has branches in what? 4 other countries aside the US. So when we sent a mail out that, okay, everybody, can you please send in your reports as the analyst you want to analyze? Now, Canada sends their report, France sends, and Germany sends. But one country did not send, which is Mexico, didn't send on time. So finally, Mexico sent in their data. Now, if this was to be done, let's assume you were copying files from one folder or the other, and this Mexico guy just say, okay, Mr. Analyst, I'm so sorry. We couldn't put our report together on time. So please, here is the Mexico sales. And you've looked at all the work you've done. You just start crying that, how do you start all of this again? But look at the beautiful thing about Power Query. Now that my Mexico sales is here, all you have to do is, anywhere you have your Mexico sales on your system, just go and copy it. Just copy the file, go to your international and paste it there. All right. So you go to this is my Mexico. I'm opening my international that already has my Canada, Denmark, and France. And I just posted my what? My Mexico. Now I'm going back into my Excel. All I just have to do within Excel is to right click on my pivot table and say what? Refresh. And just like magic, my Mexico sale, remember my revenue here is 272 million and I only have 4 entries here. So my query is loading. And just like magic, we are going to see how we didn't have to start all of those processes again. We've been able to automate it in such a way that any new branch or any new country or branch that is sending in their report, because they are all of the same file type and we already took data from a folder, we only need to go and drop what? That country or the folder or the file. Beautiful, it's here. Can we all see this now? My Mexico sales has been brought into my pivot table without happening to lift a finger. By just clicking on refresh, my Mexico sales is here. Does anybody else have this? Are we here? If you are here, please let me see. Let's quickly signify that we are here so that I know we are on the same page. I'm not getting responses. Someone says, I'm having problem loading the Mexico sales. Just copy the Mexico into the international folder, come back into your Excel, right click and hit what? Refresh. Does anybody have a question? Are you facing any challenges I can help you with? If you want to talk, you can just raise up your hand. You can raise your hand. I can quickly attend to your question. I can unmute your mic and then you can talk. Are we here? Are we all here? Can I proceed? We have 2 questions. From where do I copy the Mexico sales to all sales? Okay, you know, the sheets, the files I sent, just go to your the zipped file. Go and look for Mexico. If you open your the exercise file Power Query, you're going to see Mexico sales. You copy Mexico, you open your international sales and drop Mexico there. Once you do this, you have your latest report. Once you do this and you go back to Excel, you can hit refresh to get your latest report. All right? Are we here now? Does anybody have a question on what we've covered so far? Again, let's quickly do another transformation or another report, basically. So let's say I also want to know my month-on-month revenue across the states. So I can go to insert, I say pivot table, use this workbook data. Okay, someone is raising their hand. Let's see. Someone is raising their hands. All right. So, okay, Damoye, I've just unmuted your mic. Please, you can ask your question.
Okay, good afternoon. My question is, there was a time my system just crashed. So by the time I restarted and came back to Excel, I thought I was going to have a recovered file for what I've done so far, but I couldn't find it. So I just wanted to ask, is it that Power Query does not auto save like like working on normal Excel or something.
No, your question is not clear.
Okay, my system crashed.
Okay.
So by the time I restarted it, I came back
Yes.
to Excel. So
Yes.
normally if I'm working on Excel like that, it's auto
Yes.
save. So I'll just recover what I did last. So,
Okay.
but for the Power Query, it wasn't like that. So I just wanted to ask, is it that Power Query does not do that, like the normal working with Excel sheet without Power
Okay.
Query? So whenever I'm working with Power Query, I can always pay attention to that. That's what I'm asking.
Actually, if you're working with in the Power Query editor, right? All steps that if you're working within the Power Query editor, your work gets saved the moment you close and load. Is either you close and load it back into Excel and you save it, or you maybe close and load if you're working within Power BI. But as you apply, even if you've applied 100 steps, and maybe peradventure your system goes off or anything, you are not going to be able to recover the steps you've applied in Power Query. The point where you get to recover is the point where you've saved or where you've closed and load that sort Power Query back into Excel. You've saved that workbook. So you cannot really recover queries. However, if you perform some operations and then you've closed the Power Query editor, if your Excel crashes at that point, I'm sure you should be able to recover your Power Query. I hope that answers your question. So if you are still working within the Power Query editor and your system goes off, I'm not so sure, like Excel, if you are able to recover the files you are working on. But if you've closed it and you've saved, you should be able to get your files. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other question before we move on? All right, beautiful. So I wanted to perform another operation. So I wanted to I went to insert a pivot table and then use this workbook data on the existing worksheet. And I says, okay, so I want to get a month-on-month sales. So again, I'm going to bring my dates into rows. Let me group them. I want to group by, let me group by year now. I want to group by month and years. So I'll click OK. So I'm going to have 1999, blah, 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 blah. So 1999, 2000. So what I want to do is to first, I want to remove the dates. I only want to have the year and the, or let me remove the month now. Let me just have the year. So I have all my year, 1999 to 2015. So the next thing, I want to move my country to, columns. So I have my sales in Canada, France, Mexico, Germany, and the United States. Then I'm going to drag my revenue to values. So let me just quickly format this with the $sign, and then I'm going to remove my decimals. Can we all see this now? So now I've been able to segment my data by year and then by what? By country. To make this more visually appealing, I can just highlight this column or highlight this data. I can go to conditional formatting and say my cell rules. Okay, I want color scale, and this is the color scale I want. So I formatted this revenue based on the years. So I have my most revenue at the top and then my least revenue at the bottom. Now, the final step of all our analysis is, now we've been able to, we've covered bringing data from Excel. We've covered bringing data from a database. Now, I want to quickly, okay, I didn't share this with us, but I want to quickly show us how to bring in data from web. All right. So I'm going to go to data now. I'm going to go to show queries. So this is, I can click on any one here. I can right click on any of these queries and do what? I can say edit to take me back into the Power Query window, or the Power Query editor rather. So what I want to do, I want to get data from web. So I'm going to say new source. I'm going to say online service, other sources. And I will say web. Or rather, before I do that, let me quickly go to, let me open a new, so I want to get world population, for instance. So world population. All right, I'm having two people raise their hands. Let me just quickly attend to this before we move on. Fauzia raised her hand, so I'm going to unmute your mic now. Okay, Fauzia, you can talk now. You can unmute your mic and speak and ask your question.
I'm unable to group the dates.
Okay.
The grouping function is not clicking.
The group function, you've done the right click on your date, right? You bring in your date to rows, then you've right clicked on the dates, you've clicked on group. Can you hear me?
It's not responding. I can hear you.
Yes. Were you able to select group?
I wasn't.
Why? Did you see it, or was it grayed out? Or you didn't see it at all?
It was grayed out.
Okay.
I could see it, but it was grayed out.
Okay, now that error will probably be from your Power Query. Maybe you didn't convert your date column to dates. Do you understand me?
I did.
Okay, you need to actually go back. You need to go back to Power Query, make sure that your date is actually formatted to dates, and then you can do this again.
Sorry, I did. But I think the issue there is that when I click on pivot table,
yes,
so that the pivot table page that is going to bring.
Yes.
So mine is giving me that workbook model something that is immediately after that connection name. There is a button that is displaying, but mine doesn't have.
I'm not sure. Okay, what we can do, we can look at this together, maybe after this class. But for the purpose of this, let's move on. I'll also make the recording available. If you still have this challenge after this class, let me know. We can look at it together. All right?
Okay.
Yes. All right. So can we all see my screen right now? So I want to bring in data from the web. So I'm going to click countries. So this is a website. This is Worldometer, right? It has all the population of the of all countries in the world. So I want to bring this into my data, or into my my Power Query, such that anytime this data is changing on this website, it also changes on my what? On my output. I think we saw it in most of the COVID-19 visualization that we see online. People actually connect to live website to get this data, and then they put it on their dashboard such that anytime the COVID-19 cases are changing, all right, they get to change, this gets to change in their workbook as well. So I'm going to copy this URL right now. I'm going to head back into my Power Query and I'm going to paste this URL here. So under basic, I'll click OK. We can always practice. You don't have to practice this along with me. You can practice this in your spare time. So how to connect directly to a URL. So once you do that, you are going to have a navigator pop up. This is taking a while to load. All right, it's here now. So Power Query is going to go to that URL and look for all the tables that are on the URL. So this is the table I want. Can we see it now? This is the table, and then this is the table view. If I want to see the web view, I can click here too to see exactly the way that table is on the web. But this is what I want, the table view. So I'll click on my table, and then I want to click on what? OK, to transform, to bring this data into Power Query. So my table is here now. Can we see? This is my table, my world population. World population. All right, so this table is in my Power Query right now. So if I take it back into Excel, it's going to go with me. Okay, someone says, please start over. All right, so what I did, it says, can we reach out through your email for those unable to practice now? Yes, Monsurat, you can. So I went to new source. I went to other sources, web. All right. And then, so it says from web. So you need to first go to the URL. So you're going to paste the URL you want here. So I'm coming back here. This is my URL, worldometer info, blah, blah, blah. I'll copy this. Then I'll bring this and paste this URL here. And I'll click OK and OK. So I'm going to have my data here. All right, so I'm going to have the serial number, the country, the population, the percentage yearly change, the net change, density, and all of that. So if I want to use this for anything, let's assume this is the coronavirus cases, for instance, I can then start to analyze how many cases are in the north, how many cases are in what continent, Africa, Europe, Asia, what have you, and what have you. So you can see from here already, we can see that Nigeria is actually the 7th most populated country in the world. I didn't really know that until now. Our population as of 2020 is 206 million. So we are following in China, India, United States, Indonesia, and Pakistan, and Brazil. Oh, wow. I didn't know this before. So if I use this with it in a visualization, anytime that data is changing on that URL, my data also changes as well. All right. So that is that. So finally, I want us to, okay, we've spent 2 hours, 30 minutes already in the class. Please, I want us to do a quick survey right now. The final thing we want to cover is actually how to bring in data from the database. All right, how to bring in data from the database, connect it to our data model, and do analysis. Do you think we should still cover this, or we should postpone this to probably another class? I don't want people to be so bored. So I'm asking if we feel this should be pushed to another class so that we should end this year, or we should just take it right now. All right, I'm getting a lot of responses for another class. Okay. So far, it seems the decision is unanimous that we postpone. Okay, another class. All right, everybody wants us to have this in another class. All right. If you have any, let's get the video for today's class and postpone for the rest, and postpone the rest for another class. Okay, beautiful. All right, so I want to believe we should stop here. Everybody, so someone is asking, but why can't I get the data from the system even when I have downloaded it? I wouldn't know this, Chidozie. Your file should be on your system if you've downloaded it. Once you've downloaded the zip file, you need to right click on it and extract the files in the folder, all right? And you'll be able to see your files in the system. Okay, thank you very much for attending this session. I want to believe what we've covered so far, we understand it. Someone says, kindly let us know how to get a video so as to practice well before the next class. Okay, beautiful. All right, so today we covered how to connect data from Excel files, how to connect data to a folder, and we're able to really extensively cover this topic. I really do hope that we understand it. To show that we do, I would want us to send, for those that are able to complete this, if you can do some sort of visualization. So what do I mean by this? So you can create from what we've covered so far in terms of revenue, in terms of, so what we did here for the sum of revenue for total units, try to do that for all sales, and let's try to put it in some sort of chart or visualization. Also, this table we have here, you might want to say, let me close this now. Let me remove the year now. So you want to have your yearly sales, your sales by region, your total unit sales. So I can quickly put this in some sort of chart and say, insert. I can insert column charts here. All right, remove all of this. Sorry, I beg your pardon. So I want to remove this, I want to remove this, I want to remove this. Okay, I want to leave this and hide all field axis. So I can copy this, bring this to a new tab like this, go to, I can go to view. I can go to view and remove my grid lines. And what I'm just trying to say basically is, let's try to put this in some sort of, some form of chat and send to me. You can either send it to me on my LinkedIn profile, I'll send it here, or you can send it directly to my mail, okay? So let's try and build some sort of visual from the insights we've gotten so far, from the data we analyzed, by answering some of the questions that we posed, all right? So this, the sales by countries, by year, by month, if possible, and then the total units sold and all that. So let's try and build some visualization and send to me. So you can send it to me on my mail, or you can send it to me via email. So someone say, which platform will you post the video? I'm going to upload the video online, and then I'm going to post the video online, and then I'm going to send you a link. So if you have any question, please reach out to me via email or via LinkedIn. I'm going to post my LinkedIn here now. Please try to follow me, ask me questions. I'm always open and willing to answer questions. So if we don't have any other, I want to post. Why is this so difficult? Okay. All right, maybe I'll just send it to the mail. All right, let me just type it here. www.linkedin.com/in dash Sunny. Okay, so I just left my LinkedIn ID on the chat box. Please go through it. Someone says, can you scroll to the slide with the questions? Okay, so this is the question. Someone says, I want to screenshot this. All right, so for your analysis, try and if you can do a screenshot of this page, try to do that so that it will help you with your analysis. All right, with this, I believe we have come to the end of this class. I want to thank everybody for coming here today, and I want to appreciate you all. Again, if you have questions, I'm always willing and open to answer them, and I believe that sums it up. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you.